The Great Impersonator is the fourth and latest studio album by platinum-selling artist Ashley Frangipani, more commonly known as Halsey. On the day of this upload, this album will be 4 months old, which is fitting because it's also the fourth in her catalogue. You will likely know Halsey from their hit songs with... what's the song with the Chainsmokers called again? Her hit song with the Chainsmokers called Closer, but also her hit song Without Me and Bad at Love. The album rollout for The Great Impersonator went viral due to Halsey impersonating various artists that she was inspired by while making the record. And in a promotional video, Halsey had also mentioned that because she thought this record was going to be her last, this was the album that she really wanted to make, and she wanted to imagine herself in every single decade. What would Halsey sound like in the 70s? What would Halsey sound like in the 80s? What would Halsey sound like in the 90s, in the early 2000s? And a lot of people foolishly went into the album thinking it was just going to be Halsey impersonating her idols. But the album title actually takes its name after the disease that Halsey was diagnosed with, lupus SLS. This is very much blended into the theme and the lyrics of this record in such a way that I don't think you can ignore this piece of context. She was in a very different place while recording and writing it. But with a heightened sense of self-awareness, Halsey is just as aware and conscious of their musical identity and goals, but not in a way where it feels like she's trying to redo anything. People call lupus the great imitator because its symptoms often mimic those of other conditions, including Lyme disease, diabetes, and fibromyalgia. I'll just skip that one. A person with lupus might experience changing symptoms, and the signs can come and go or vary in severity over time. It can include some of the following symptoms: butterfly-shaped rash on the nose and face, fatigue, painful joints, anemia, swelling in the hands, feet, or around the eyes, chest pain during deep breathing, hair loss, abnormal blood clotting, fingers turning blue or white when cold, ulcers in the mouth or nose, headaches, fever. And that is essentially the main topic of this album because Halsey was not sure if they were going to come out of this diagnosis alive. In an interview with Z100, her local radio station that she grew up with, she also mentioned that this album is just a revisitation and an ode to decades. And she also mentioned that that is because her career happened in her 20s, which is exactly a decade. Regardless, this is by far Halsey's most introspective work, most meticulously put together, and Halsey has producer credits on some of the tracks. I personally can't imagine putting something this personal together when you are not only suffering from the mental hurdles that come with putting an album like this together, but also suffering physically from a debilitating illness. So I would just like to go over some of the health issues that Halsey has mentioned because again, I don't think this context should be ignored. She was diagnosed with endometriosis very early on in her career, describes having a miscarriage on stage when she was 20, and realizing that that was the moment that there was something wrong with her. It then led to her lupus diagnosis, and she has a form of T-cell disorder. It is a type of leukemia that is basically chronic. After that, she also had a baby and subsequently was dealing with postpartum depression. Before any of this happened, Halsey was also very open about her struggle with bipolar disorder. So she has definitely had her fair share of health issues. And it is essentially just what this album is about. I just also think it's interesting the way this album is put together because it's not just about the illness, it's also about leaving your child behind, the fear that comes with that, planning your estate. Besides this, she was also going through how should I say that her fucking ex was a dickhead without being an asshole? And those are also themes that are covered on this album, besides meeting a new love interest and having to tell them that you are ill and you also have a child to take care of. I think in general, especially women are going to be able to relate to this album because it just provides a very wide range of topics, especially when it comes to dealing with death and being scared of dying. Starting off with Only Girl Living in LA, I feel like this is a peek inside Halsey's head, what seems to be right after the diagnosis. We have a swelling instrumental with a clear lead vocal, and the backing vocals almost sound like the frantic crying of a child, which is almost foreshadowing to the main single and the next song on this album, Ego, quoting the line, "I'm all grown up, but somehow lately I'm acting like a fucking baby." I don't really understand why people thought this album came across like it was exaggerated, when in this song she clearly states, "I think I'm special because I cut myself wide open, as if it's honorable to bleed." And I think she's quite aware of how she sounds, but at the same time, she's dealing with a very serious diagnosis. The inner turmoil that you go through when you have to deal with this is crazy, which I think is why we have the droning drums at the end. It's almost like banging your head against the wall in frustration. in anger, confusion, with the world, but also with oneself. Then we have Ego, which is the lead single with the 90s influence and one of the pop rock songs off of this album. I love seeing the VMA performance for this song because we see Halsey in jorts, knee-high Converse on a lowrider, and then she opens a garage door where her band is waiting. A scene that is so reminiscent of Freaky Friday, and she has her references on point for this album. The song is about ego death and Halsey coming to terms with the fact that growing up does not necessarily mean gaining wisdom. We think we grow up and we can just naturally deal with our emotions, but you really have to put in work to improve your mental state. I think this is a natural progression of what Halsey has written about in the past and why her fans resonate with her music. Ultimately, I think this is a good choice for a lead single. It's catchy, it's real, and it reflects the introspective nature of the record and what's about to come. Then we have Dog Years. We get to the grungy PJ Harvey inspired song. I think Halsey sets the tone very accurately, and I just have to say the first verse of this song is so cleverly written, going on about universal blood types, and then she goes on to say, I'm trying to be positive, but O is really hard. And it just goes to show that she is actually really good at writing, and this is weaved throughout her records, and you can clearly tell she has just a knack for. Look, this song is just heartbreaking. Halsey describes the passing of her own dog and the moments that she had. Oh my god, I'm almost gonna cry reading this myself. And the moments she described holding him while he passed and what she told him. And every time I heard that line, my eyes just welled up. And personally, I love the all dogs go to heaven, but what about a bitch line. I think this is foreshadowing for what's to come on the album, because most women who stand up for themselves can relate to this because it's the quickest insult to be used, especially when you're coming to terms with your own mortality whilst dealing with grief of losing a pet. Of course, you're going to walk through all the things that you were told about death and heaven. Next, we have the crux of this album, Letter to God, 1974, where Halsey admits to praying to be sick because she had a boy in her class who had leukemia. She was jealous because her own home situation was very unstable and she just wanted to be loved in the same way that he was, which of course is understandable for a child to do. I think many of us look back on the Make-A-Wish Foundation content that was on TV and we thought, oh, but I want to go to Disneyland with Lindsay Lohan. The song nicely follows along the themes of the previous songs where we revisit our preconceived notions on death, like getting upset as a child to see a dead animal on the road. And I think the retrospective and the tone, the storytelling that this song goes through is just very necessary for the record and is definitely an essential part of context. Then we have the obviously Fleetwood Mac inspired, drawing many comparisons to Dreams, the song Panic Attack. On this song, Halsey's voice is very sweet but dynamic, and I especially love the "Is it love?" at the end, which is a very nice touch. The melody on this is just lovely. But again, lyrically, the themes of health issues are tied together very flawlessly with a classic love song. And the song also directly references the nonfiction book, The Body Keeps the Score, which I didn't read yet, but I do think it's cool that this song basically comes with citations. And it seems at this point in the album, Halsey is yet to grasp the severity of the diagnosis. Not quite able to tell when she's feeling what, but it makes for a beautiful song. I'm really just also dealing with the struggles of what I mentioned before, meeting someone while you're in a very vulnerable state, not knowing if you're going to pass away, leave behind a child, but still feeling like shit, but wanting to be with someone. And then we have The End, which was the first promotional single of the album. She really lays everything out bare on this song, stating that she was first struggling with mental health and later physical illness, such as endometriosis and her lupus diagnosis. And we also see her tying it back to Letter to God 1978, asking to be loved like a child. A very bittersweet message as she's writing about finally having a partner who can stick with her when it gets hard, ultimately having to wonder whether they will stick around. Will you leave when it gets hard? And can you pick me up at 8 because my treatment starts today? Those are definitely the most devastating lines in the song. I'm almost crying. My god. Arguably the most devastating on the record, I Believe in Magic, and especially for women going through an awful diagnosis after pregnancy, this is one of the most difficult emotions to deal with. To tack on some more sadness, we also hear her son Ender in the back, which again just makes me feel like we're peeking inside her mind while she has her son around. And it also describes a beautiful realization she had in her relationship with her mother, reflecting on aging and realizing her mom once felt the same that she did now. Like a plea in her deathbed, she sings, "Please tell them I love them so," referring to her mother and son. Devastating! Then we move on to the next in the trilogy of Letter to God, 1983. It paints an image of a live concert. It's interesting to know that in a podcast with her own doctor, SheMD, Halsey described one of her earliest struggles with her health where she miscarried on stage. So I do feel it's interesting that she placed this on the record even though she must have been quite traumatized by that experience. And she speculates on her prayer coming too late, referring to her previous letters to God. And my God, is it devastating yet again. And again, just regressing to very natural emotions, especially when you're dealing with fear of death, fear of your own death, your estate, what you're leaving behind, your children, your family, and at the end of the day, just yearning for simple old love. And following up on the themes of death, she also revisits her own friends dying before her in the Dolly Parton-inspired catchy tune Hometown. And again, we just see the natural progression of what someone goes through when they're processing their potential death. You start thinking of the people that died before you start reflecting on their death, and inadvertently how people will reflect on yours. But after all of the struggle, she is not feeling any need to go back to her hometown. And I love that this is Dolly Parton inspired. I just feel like it's so fitting. It just makes so much sense. But she definitely gives her own spin and makes it very Halsey. And as for Kate Bush on the next inspired track, I Never Loved You, reflecting on her estate, which would likely go to her partner. It's part story blended with her real life. And she said this about the song. The title of the song is I Never Loved You, which is very bratty. And then in the record, this gets a little bait and switch, which is kind of like, I never loved you in vain, you know? The sentiment in the record actually is, I did love you. I was thinking a lot about Dolly and Whitney, and I was thinking about, I will always love you, and I was thinking, what is the reverse engineering of that song? Just that sentiment. I just thought it was an iconic title. Then we probably have the best on this album, Darwinism, with a piano lead that reminds me of Heathens by 21 Pilots. And the main sentiment of this song is written in the line, they say God makes no mistakes, but I might disagree. And again, I'm sure that just emotions that you go through when you get sick, and you're wondering about why it is happening. Some people might turn to religion, but if you're not religious, you'll definitely start questioning evolution and start asking yourself, what's the point of this? And it just truly goes to show that Halsey went through a full scope of emotions while processing her illness and her potential death. It's really quite amazing how Halsey managed to pack all the thoughts and fears surrounding death into one work of art, down to what happens to your remains. And I love that for this track, Halsey impersonated Bowie for this song, because the whole album feels so similar to the sentiment of Black Star. And then we have Lonely is the Muse. Ugh, this song just goes incredibly hard. It's my personal favorite. It's based on a poem that she uploaded on her Tumblr after this. I just love the writing of this track. Let me read you some of my favorites. I was built from special pieces that I learned how to unscrew, and I can always reassemble to fit perfectly for you or anybody that decides that I'm of use. Lonely is the Muse. It's just so clever, it's well done. I love the image that she paints of parts that are removable, and it definitely couples with the themes of feeling like you're not really working as you're supposed to, or the fact that maybe some parts of you are interchangeable, especially when you start questioning what your body is doing, how it's working, and your evolution. Maybe you do start feeling like something that is just, I don't want to say disposable, but yeah, something that you can reassemble. And after the first few listens, I didn't really see how this song fit on the album, but learning more about Halsey and their health journey, it makes a lot of sense. And the experience of being a mother is just exclusive to being a woman. And she comments on how she knows her worth, but she's reduced to a body in someone's bed. And in the bridge, it's almost like she's a ghost-like creature haunting her ex-lover, like shining through the light in the room. So she almost seems like she's haunting her ex-lover in the line, I will tear apart your bedroom, I'll call you in the night, I will exist in every second just to decorate your life. And when you're done, you can discard me like the others always do. But see, also kind of reducing herself to a puppet of some sort. And again, I'm sure that when you have a child and people constantly comment on how you look or how you should be acting, or especially the father of your child being in a difficult relationship with you, you must definitely feel that way. I just also want to take a second to discuss the artwork that comes with this single. It depicts Halsey lying on the statue of Victor Noir's grave, and one of the famous legends says that women who want to become pregnant should touch the you know what of the statue, thereby fulfilling the wish. I did think this was interesting because, again, we have imagery of parts that can be unscrewed, tying it with motherhood, being objectified as a woman, and decorating someone's life through shining light in a room. And I think it's interesting because also part of Halsey's pregnancy journey was the fact that she needed a lot of help in order to conceive naturally. And that's why I didn't necessarily really understand why this was a part of the artwork in the first instance, but you really have to like dig for more information and learn about what her personal life was like. Like, she had a hard time conceiving and she really wanted a baby. So again, it makes sense that this is the artwork here. And I don't know, it just also reminds me of Nana. It's such a strange way. It looks like Nana from the anime. And speaking of artwork, I also just wanted to take some time to talk about the general album cover that comes with this record. So, as I mentioned earlier in the symptoms for lupus, one of the symptoms is a butterfly-shaped rash on the nose and face. And she actually incorporated this into the album cover of The Great Impersonator, where, you know, you can tend to look quite sickly and pale, but still have a flushed face, which is one of the reasons why she went with this album artwork. I also love the addition of the star, making it feel like it's some kind of magic show. It was cool because her tour is also called For My Last Trick, so it's very much going to be revolved around magic. But yeah, I do think this album cover is stunning. I love the addition of that it's almost printed on canvas and it's integrated into the way the picture is on the album cover. But yeah, so the album cover definitely gives a good taste of what the album is going to be about. But anyway, imagine you have postpartum depression, lupus, chronic leukemia, you think you're gonna die, and your baby daddy is an asshole. The silent rage felt in the song is so real, and the keyboard just lingers throughout the song, but it never fully resolves. And I also like how this is one of the only songs on the album with a male backing vocal, kind of humming at the end of the song as if he's burning everything down happily. I love the song personally, and it just perfectly entails female rage. Then we move on to Life of the Spider, arguably the most vulnerable song, describing the darkest moments of her illness, and the piano sounds hollow, like it's being played in an empty house. And she compares her frail body to a spider and someone jumping at the sight of her. At the Great Impersonator listening event on the 8th of September, Halsey shared that Life of the Spider was one of the saddest songs they've ever written. This is the saddest song I've ever written in my entire life. This song is gonna sound like a voice note. In a way, it sort of is. Of all the songs I've written in my entire career, this is the song I'm most proud of, which is why I did it the way that it did, where it doesn't have super high quality vocals or fancy production or anything like that. It's just the song in the way that it came to me. It's just me and my piano. I definitely think that this one is going to be the hardest for people to listen to, but it's also the most raw and real, and the song almost sounds like it is echoing through her skeleton. Of course, after getting a song about Halsey's relationship with their mother, we also get a song about the relationship to their father, just reflecting on how you were raised and what happened in your childhood and how it affects you. Halsey expresses a desire to be washed clean, and I think in this case, it is also the fact that she doesn't want to pass her own childhood trauma onto her own son. Then we have Lucky, sampled of the Britney Spears song of the same name, reflecting on her luck being famous and the double-edged sword that it is, and just reflecting on her depression and how she has everything, but she's still unhappy. There's also Laughing in the backing track, which actually ties back to the first track on the album, Only Girl Living in LA. And it's also about speculation on her health and her abilities as a mother, having to do with the fact that people are speculating on your weight, you must be using drugs, and not thinking of the severity of her illness. The music video, I definitely really recommend. It is directed by Gia Coppola. It is absolutely beautiful to look at. I would definitely recommend watching it in 4K. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was not prepared. And the bridge in the music video, when she takes off her wig and she puts on the IV, oh, you can just see the tears in her eyes. Oh, it's just devastating. So not only is this song like a refined version of the Britney song, but she really makes it her own. It's about her own experience. Not only is it a more refined version of the Britney song, she really makes it her own. And oh, am I really gonna cry? Am I really gonna cry? Yeah, it's just so, oh my god. Oh. But yeah, essentially on this song, we come to the biggest conclusion where she reflects on having lied to everybody about how good she was really doing for a whole year and saying that that was the biggest lie of her career. I don't know. Even though this song is catchy and it, like, at first sight, it does kind of sound happy, it's just genuinely really devastating. It just always gets me. It's like very real and I don't know, it's beautiful. I definitely think that it's one of the best songs on this album. And if I'm in a good mood, I can listen to it, but just like knowing what I know, having done the research that I did, it was just very admirable that she was able to make something like that. And I think it's very fitting for it to go on this album, and it just makes so much sense when you think about, you know, the inspiration that it took from the Great Imitator, right? So it is the doctor's name phrase that they use for the illness because it's really good at imitating other illnesses. And how cool and badass is it that you can look at something like that and just think about it creatively and take inspiration from it and come away from it and just be like, hey, but what if I did the same thing and I impersonated my favorite act? And I really think that this is the song where the sentiment and the context, everything about this album really comes into one. Like the fact that it's actually sampling the original Britney song and applying it to her own life is just... The song's fantastic, it's super catchy, and it's beautiful. Sorry for getting a little bit emotional there. Anyway, after that, we get the final installation of the Letter to God trilogy, the 1998 version. Here we hear her son. If you're not an absolute mess by this point in the record, I don't know what to tell you. And we move on to the title track, which was Björk inspired. And somehow the tone is very hopeful with plucky strings, escalating bass tones, and twinkly guitars. And she ties the lyrics back to I Never Loved You, talking about a car crash, which almost is kind of a metaphor for how she's dealing with her problems on this record. And the intonation of the also sounds like she's having a eureka moment, at peace with all the scenarios that she's gone over in her head. The orchestral type of vibe that this song is giving is just very beautiful, and it's a very nice note to end this devastating album on. Personally, I'm not that much of a Björk fan, but I do really see where she got the inspiration from, and I thought the picture where she was impersonating Björk was also just very well done. Technically, this is not on the original album, but there is a sort of deluxe version with an extra song, which is called Alice of the Upper Class, and this is one of my favorite songs just because it goes so hard, even though it's not on the original track list. But I think it makes much more sense as a conclusion to the record, like a ketamine-filled delusion in the fast lane straight to hell. It's also just a great middle finger to the people who didn't understand this record. Can't you see that I'm an imposter, as the last line of this album is just mwah, perfection. And besides that, I love the glitchy editing of the vocal right before we get into the first chorus, and it just genuinely sounds so punky, but like early 2000s at the same time, and it really just ties it nicely together with the first single, Ego, that we got at the beginning of the record. I just think it's a great note to end on. We end on a high note. It's a good song. I revisit this song quite a lot, and I just think it's catchy, it's wonderful, it's great. Yesterday I added this to my document after I had a few drinks, but I do think it's funny to mention it. People might have expected more of the impersonator part of this album, but it's also cool to have instructions to vibe to this album, you know? And when I'm listening to this album, it's like I'm sitting next to a friend that has the same taste as me, and they're showing the music that they made. They're showing you the songs, and you get the references, you know where it comes from, especially knowing what they went through. It is a unique experience, and you either get it or you don't. And I'm also not going to give this a rating, because how I'm going to review albums, I'm only going to review them if I like them, because I want to spread some positivity on the internet. And if I don't like an album, I'm not going to talk about it. So if you are hoping for me to review an album, you better hope that I like it. I just think it's good to only say good things about an album. Wow, how honorable is it to make an album that is just so raw and real, and people didn't get it. People didn't get it. And 4 months later, wow, why am I getting emotional again? Give me a second. Oh. So this album is 4 months old now, and I do think it has stood the test of time so far. And I can definitely see myself returning to this album. It has very good highlights such as Darwinism and Arsonist, Alice of the Upper Class, Lucky, Ego, Lonely is the Muse. Those are all very, very much highlights on this album, and if you can have a special relationship to those songs, you don't necessarily have to go through the absolute heart attack that is this album, but you have to commend someone for overcoming an illness. Halsey had also said in the SheMD podcast interview that she just really wanted to make an album with music that she wanted to make, and in order to recover properly, she had to focus on something that made her happy. Oh, okay. That's it for me. That's all I just wanted to say about this record. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed my first review. Check out my other videos if you are into music that was popular on Tumblr. I have also made a video about Badlands by Halsey. And please subscribe if you would like to see more videos. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment. Tell me what your favorite song from The Great Impersonator is. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Peace.